Well, this morning, Ken and I were talking about the importance of Safer Internet Day and the importance of digital values and e-responsibility around that. And I thought it might be nice this afternoon to put it into a more practical context and just discuss some of the things that have come up in our learning providers and give the viewers some insights. So, do people want to introduce themselves?
Yeah, well, I'm Cathy Boyne, I'm the e-learning advisor, at the moment responsible for FE, but e-safety is a big thing in the colleges that I support at the moment.
And I'm Chris Barber, the e-learning advisor with responsibility for some of the FE colleges and the independent specialist colleges.
Yeah, and I'm Ken Scott, and I look after the infrastructure side as well as supporting learning providers. If I might dive in straight away, as I've introduced myself. From the technical point of view, a lot of the IT managers are concerned that there's such vulnerabilities around that the easiest way is to lock everything down and restrict as much as possible. Now, I've been fighting against that for years. Cathy and I ran an event about 4 or 5 years ago about trying to see both sides of this particular one, to block or not to block. And it's very, I know as an IT director myself from years ago, it's with limited resources, it's a lot easier to say, right, well, we just won't allow that. It saves us a lot of hassle.
But in answer to that at the moment, it's not okay to do that anymore, Ken,
No.
because Ofsted are looking for you to be able to keep your students safe. So that's not about locking everything down for them, that's about teaching them about how to keep themselves safe online, so they can make the right choices about the resources that they look at. And digital literacy, of course, comes into that as well. But they're interviewing students now and asking how safe they feel and what the college or the learning provider has done about teaching them to be safe on the internet, which means that actually they've got to open up things.
Quite yes, because if you're not exposed to the risks, you have no ways of learning how to deal with it. No, good point.
I think the other issue is that you can't just rely on the fact that when in college, the students are only accessing the internet via college equipment. Yeah. Students are bringing their own devices, be it a laptop or be it their smartphones, their iPads, and they're using 3G to get onto Wi-Fi or just accessing the 3G, and therefore they're on the internet when they're in college. So even if things are shut down in college, the students are still going on the internet. And you're absolutely right, Cathy, it's not about being shut down and not letting access. It's about teaching people how to be safe. It's a skill that we need to teach our learners.
Yeah. I think most technical managers, though, would see a bit of a dichotomy here, and they have to keep the net open as much as they possibly can to satisfy the Ofsted inspectors. But at the same time, they have a commitment to child protection and just protection in general. So there is always that compromise in that sites are actually filtered out no matter what.
Yes, it's a big issue, that is. You know, it was from years ago, I can remember a child and family course which had the pages blocked because it mentioned petticoats. So, you know, something as silly as that, and you can see that the filtering is not narrow enough to really be of any use. And the thing that people do with that is they just find ways around it. So I think Deborah's point is very good, that it's the educating and putting more of the responsibility on the people who are using it to behave responsibly, because you can only block and prevent so much.
And I think one of the other things that's important that's happening, and we touched on this morning, was that it's not only about what's happening in the colleges, but it's what's happening between the students. So, for example, this is something that happened in one of our learning providers. A student, Ruth, came to talk to one of the members of staff about one of her student peers' Facebook pages, because she felt uncomfortable about it. She didn't like what he was posting online, didn't like the pictures, and she asked the staff member to have a look at it. And I think what she found was that it was a public profile, but there wasn't really anything that was illegal or against any of the Facebook policies on it. And I think this is some of the things that are coming out in, especially in the learning providers, is that the students are being told what to do, and the students are being told what not to do. And I think this is something that discussions about e-safety? Is it the responsibility of college staff to be monitoring what is on, what people are posting online, and what's their responsibility around that?
Well, that's a big issue, isn't it? And whose responsibility? Especially if students are using their own devices on the college network and or using their own devices on the 3G network. Because if they're accessing, let's say, porn or something like that, but they're on college premises but not using college equipment, there's a big dichotomy there about whose responsibility it is. And on that one, is it a staff member's responsibility? Because I wouldn't have liked to think when I was a teacher.
Legally it isn't. It isn't. I mean, legally, if they're accessing it through 3G, no matter where they are, it is not a staff member's responsibility. It's just whether they have a moral right.
Well, and it's also the point, the publicity of something saying, this has gone into the college, gets into the papers, could be very damaging for everybody concerned.
It's possibly likely to do so, but I mean, it is an effect. But if they're using the college network, then that's a different matter.
Yes.
I think that there is an area there where staff can maybe take it upon themselves to be educating the students about what their digital footprint is, even though it's not necessarily college related. Staff can be the ones that can be educating the students about the importance of what they're posting, or in fact in this particular case, perhaps saying to this particular student, you're not actually doing anything wrong, but have you considered what persona you're putting out publicly? And perhaps educating people about the privacy settings on, for example, Facebook or any other social media network.
I think what makes it be very clear to people is that what they put on, say, Facebook is there forevermore unless they remove it.
Yes, we were talking about that this morning.
And an employer will.
Yeah.
Not always, but nowadays fairly routinely, there's some employers will search Facebook to see what sort of person they're taking in.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And people just have to be aware of this. It's as simple as that. They cannot post anything which, in future years, might compromise them.
Yeah, it's a very good point.
And it's a simple thing. I commented on a friend's son of mine who went to a party dressed in a Nazi costume, in very much in the way of Prince, what's his name, and that will stay with him forevermore. It's little things like that.
Yes,
really,
it has to be very careful. And also the fact that people aren't aware, like in the exercise that we do with Scott, when we look at the people posting on Facebook and tweeting, how people that they haven't intended to hear about get into the loop. And it's a case of like something like that is a friend of a friend might post that onto a future employer. So you don't even know, even if you've got your settings locked down on your Facebook or whatever, you still could be. So I think that's a very good point, that whatever you put there, you've got to be able to broadcast.
But this is new if you think about it. Our generation, we could basically do what we like and get away with it. But nowadays you just can't do it.
No.
Well, if you had a photograph, it was a hard copy photograph, and you'd show it to your friend, and that was it. Now, it's you upload it. You don't know who's downloaded that photo, and then put it somewhere else.
No, that's very true. I think it's worth pointing out as well that the flip side to this is the huge benefit of being able to share all this information and talk to people all over the world. Let's not get too negative on this, because it's a huge amount. Used responsibly, it's a fantastic tool.
But people do have to be made aware of their responsibilities, not to post something which, even though it's slightly risque, but it'll be there forevermore.
Exactly.
20 years' time.
Exactly.
And look back on this and think, oh God, did I do that?
It's interesting what you said about it remains up there until you take it down. Even when it's been taken down, often there's a footprint left, because I know my RSC persona from when I first started here, you can still find that online even though it's not on any website.
Well, there's a site which is the Wayback Machine, which has got snapshots taken every week of all the websites. It goes around, so you can go back to see what was on in 2002. It is there forevermore.
I think there is another aspect around bullying, and I know everybody's heard of cyberbullying, which is really no different, is it, to bullying somebody in the corridor, but it's just more prolific maybe. And I think you were just saying, weren't you, about...
Yeah, I was just saying that Chris is absolutely right with his point that he made earlier about if a student's using a 3G network or a mobile network to look at websites and everything, there's no legal responsibility on the part of the learning provider. However, if it's being used for bullying, then there is, because regardless of the fact that they're not using the college network, it's bullying that's happening on the college premises. So under those cases, there needs to be a policy in place on how to deal with that and what they do. And I think there was one of those from the learning providers, wasn't there?
Yes.
Where, if I just go back to this one, there's a Simon, a student's known to have problems at home, and he's got problems forming friendships at college. His ICT access at home is very limited, but he doesn't have a social network profile or anything, but somebody created one for him. And they stated that he was gay, it showed him photoshopped images of him engaged in various compromising acts, and one comment on a picture reads, "You're such a loser, Si, you better watch your back." And he's only 17 years old, and you know, what does the student do about that, or what does the teaching staff do about that, really? So I don't know whether you have any comments to make?
Yeah, I think it comes very much into the fact that it is bullying regardless of where it's going. This is different because the fact it is going to last a long time, there is actually physical evidence of it. But it's an interesting point of somebody doing it on your behalf, because that just shows how you have to be aware of what's going on. And I know that something people do set up, usually for a business, but you could do it for yourself, is to have a Google search for your own name that you run every day to see what's happening on it. And it's silly to think that you have to go to those lengths, but you know, if somebody posting on your own behalf, that's very dangerous. But as long as the policy in the college or the learning providers is explicit enough to cover all the eventualities and has got measures that will be used, that people know that if they transgress they will be punished in some way on that, and it's carried out, then it's no different to bullying from any other form, I don't think.
And I know the social networks are social media is quite good about this sort of thing. So if you sort of inform them that this is a site that's been created and it's, you know, you're the person named, you can get them taken down, can't you?
You can do, yes.
And I think also a lot of peer pressure comes on that, and we've had examples. I think you had one example of somebody posting something on Facebook that you reported and you actually had a quiet word. And I think the peer pressure works really well on this, and the kids do tend to get together amongst themselves. So there's a bit of self-regulation.
The other aspect is that somewhere in a learning provider there has to be someone with the knowledge to actually impart the service to the students.
Yes,
so
that's
that's part of the student services to advise on Facebook, on social media policy.
Yeah.
It'd be quite good to induct students, wouldn't it? An induction on the digital footprint, if you like, and how reaching it is and what they can do with some examples like this.
Yes, that would be quite a nice little treasure hunt that you could do on there.
Yeah, you certainly could.
Yeah.
So I think that one Simon will probably help by helping him to get that site taken down. But it's the people. What do you do about the people that did create that site?
Yes.
I think the key thing, isn't it, is about teaching online respect.
Yes.
And people understanding that you might say something and who it's getting out to, and it's important to be respectful online as you might be face to face.
Exactly.
And perhaps it's that anonymity of the keyboard and the screen that makes people put up things or do things that perhaps they wouldn't dream about doing. So it's this on digital respect as well as a face-to-face respect.
No, that's absolutely right, and I think in this social media we've lost respect for one another because we do say things that we put on social media that we wouldn't actually say face-to-face. And the incident that Ken was talking about there is a moot point because it was when the riots were going on, and I know somebody who probably in a crowd of people like this would have said, let's go and have a riot, and we would have all laughed a bit at it and said nothing. But the person put it on Facebook and all of a sudden was in trouble with police and actually ended up in court for putting that on for what would have been maybe a flippant remark because it's there and it's in writing and you don't realise how far-reaching it is. Oh, what a little flippant comment said between friends, it's in between friends, your Facebook friends, how widespread that can be and how hurtful it could be to other people without you realising it.
Yeah.
So yes, it is about respect, Deborah.
That's right. You don't always get the intonation, do you?
No.
In a
No, that's
text
very
on
true.
something that's written. It's not the same as hearing somebody's voice. So what you'd hear as a joke,
Yeah.
when it's written down,
Yeah.
can be problematic.
But I do think you also need, as Kathy says, to wield a big stick about this, because
Yeah.
you can have the characters of respect, if you like, but certainly there is a potential for legal action to be taken against, not by just by the police, but defamation of
Yes,
character.
absolutely. And in
Slander,
this particular
yeah.
case, yes.
Yeah.
I think you were talking about it has to be written in the policy, and I think you were meaning the anti-bullying policy
Yes,
of a learning provider. And I think that links in with what you're saying. There has to be guidelines and rules. You can then go
Absolutely.
to students and say, you've broken a rule here, or you haven't followed the guidelines, and that students should be made aware of those when they start in the college, so that they know what is acceptable.
And I think it's like, bring it back to what we said at the beginning, it's about a whole college policy, maybe about social media, that links into your anti-bullying, but that actually makes sure that in induction you teach the students how to keep themselves safe. You do these value things that you do in induction, but include the social media and the internet into that now, and have a whole college process. And that somewhere along the line you are looking at the sites that you open up and the sites that you close down, and giving students a greater freedom, so they may be less likely to use their 3G networks and things, but rather use the college processes in the safety of the college environment.
I think we've covered a lot of information there with a lot of salient points about digital footprints and e-responsibility that are important for all learning providers in the post-16 educational sectors. So thank you very much for joining me to discuss this. I'd like to remind our viewers that if they do want any help for developing an e-safety policy, or just to talk about any of the issues that were discussed today, then please come and look for us on our website, www.jiscrsc.ac.uk.